Now that you've all read the documentation, well, I hope you did, we'll be able to get down to business. Before that, one or two things. First, there are a few different ways to use Git. You've read it in the documentation. I can create a repository locally on my Mac. I can copy a repository from a friend's computer. I can clone locally a repository from my computer, or I can clone a repository from a kind of main server and send modifications to it. And this is what we do. There's a server called Vogsphere, which is going to create automatically for you a repository whenever you subscribe to a project, and then give you the address to that repository through the intra. You just have to get the address on the intranet, clone your repository, work on it, and then send the modifications to the Vogsphere. We'll get back to this later. Speaking of URL, you'll see that the repository path that I use may look like it comes from nowhere, but it's not, I swear. I simply know the full path. However, you won't necessarily know it. You'll have to get on the intranet to get your repository path every time you have a new project. Now let's open a terminal. We'll start from the beginning, that is to say, the git clone. First, you have to tell it on which server is the repository you want to get. That is to say, Vogsphere at vogsphere.42.fr or .com, whatever, followed by a colon, then the repository path as the intro gives it. Mine looks like this, and once again, it does not come from nowhere. Yours, you'll see it on the intra. It is always shaped the same way anyways. The module, code, year, instance, code activity, code, group leaders, login. Being a group of one, I am of course the leader of my own group. You'll notice that when I write D00 at the end, so it can clone into a folder named D00. Otherwise, it'll clone into an M. Montigny folder, and that sucks because as soon as I'll be wanting to clone another one, it won't erase it, but it's going to tell me, I can't. There's already a folder with that exact same name. So name your clone at the end of the line. To spare you some time, I will also show you some shortcuts that will make your life easier. The part before that comes before the colon, you don't have to write it that long. This is just the full way to do it. You can simply use vogsphere.42.fr or .com, whatever, colon something. Or you can even use vgs.42.fr or .com something. It is the Vogsphere's short name. Or you can also do it like me, because I'm extremely lazy. You can git clone vgs colon something. It works wonderfully, and this is how I'll proceed during this whole lesson. If you ever happen to have any trouble, simply use the full form. Here I'm going to git clone. There, it says cloning into day 00. It delivers a lot of messages. Don't worry, these aren't error messages. As long as there's no error written, it's not an error. Everything it says here is the time I started my interaction. So 5:33 p.m. on June 26th of 2013. We'll be using this later. I'll explain this to you once we finish the example. Anyways, no worries, that's normal. Now here I can go into day 00, which is going to be my working repository. That is to say, the local copy of my turn repository. I'm going to work in it. As an example, I'm going to create a test.c file. I'm just going to put a main in it, which is going to do nothing, doesn't matter. We'll save it, and then for the git to consider it, we have to tell it we are interested in this precise file. We can rapidly check git status to see that right now. If I commit, git won't do anything. It says there is a test.c file, but untracked, so git does not consider it at the moment. For git to consider it, I git add test.c. We can see here in the git status, it's in the changes to be committed during the next git commit. I will now operate a git commit -m creation of test.c. The -m is to describe a commit message directly into the command line. I don't have to write one, but I'm going to do it right now because I'm too lazy to open a header. There, git commit creation of test.c. It created a file and a commit to go with it. If you look at the git status now, you'll see there is nothing more to commit. I can modify other things. For example, I can modify my test.c to add a ft put char just before the return. Now it says it isn't an untracked file, but that there is a change that isn't ready to commit because every time you change anything, you have to tell Git you're interested in it. Now we git add test.c, then I commit again, modifications of test.c. The commit messages I write are a bit rough. In real life though, you should write longer commits as it makes it easier to locate yourself in the history. Good, I committed stuff. That's lovely, but now for everything to work well, we have to send these to the server, because right now, the commits are only on the computer. The Vogsphere won't know anything about them at all. To do this, as you've read in the documentation, we use git push command to push our modifications to the server. Later, we'll be able to use git pull to pull changes from the server. Now we'll git push. If I git push right now, it won't work for a very simple reason. During the first push, we have to tell Git that it's the push destination, which is origin, as well as the branch we want to send it to, so that's master. If you don't understand, don't worry. You just have to remember the first time you push, it's git push origin master, and then it is only git push after that. Well, now it says, okay, I've just sent a new master branch in the repository, and that's very good. Something important. Pushing isn't something you do one time and then it's over. You can do it as many times as you like, there's no problem with that. Here, for example, I can create a text.txt file with some bullshit in it. I can add it, commit it, useless file. I can redo a git push, this time without specifying origin master. You'll see. There. Sent the files to the Vogsphere. However, you may have some doubts. You may wonder, but did my push work well, etc.? And you may want to check what has been turned in. Easy thing to do. You just have to redo a git clone. But instead of cloning into D00, file which already exists, it will clone into D00 verification. Once you're in the new clone, everything that is here is exactly as it exists in your turn-in repository. This will also be collected by your corrector, no matter if he is human or Molinet during your correction. I insist on this. Only what is in the turn-in repository on the Vogsphere side will be reviewed and corrected. If there's anything else, if you forget to turn it in, whatever, it won't be corrected. So be extra careful about this. Don't be fooled. Now that this is done, it feels like I blabbered a lot to explain a very simple thing, so it's time for a little example. But shorter this time so you can see what it looks like without any parasites. Alright, so let's start from the beginning again. First, we git clone. Then we clone our repository from the Vogsphere repository. While cloning it, it tells us where the clone is going. I go into the new folder. I do stuff like creating files, and we add files with git add. We commit files to create new versions with git commit. With better, clearer comments than I usually do, that would be nice. Then we push new changes to the server with git push. Now that that's done, the changes I've made are now in my turn-in folder. And if I ever want to make sure of this, I can make a clone, another one, just like I did here, and go into it to check and make sure everything is here. Then cat.tata.txt, it's there, everything's fine, no problem. I've done my turn-in wonderfully. Okay, so a few more things that are very important to know. First, as I already told you before, the Molinet, as well as your corrector, as human as he could possibly be, when he's correcting you, he's only going to consider what's in your repository. If you ever happen to say, yeah, but I forgot to turn this in, or no, there's a small modification I forgot to push, it's not going to work. There's no excuse. Only what is in your repository will be corrected. That's it. I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but this is very, very, very important. You must make absolute sure that you don't make a mistake like that. Also, when you're working in groups, because here I've done this all alone and that's lovely, when you're working in groups, you'll face a problem which is the synchronization of every group member's working copy. This is easily resolved by using the git pull command. And I'm not going to say more about it. You'll have to read the documentation if you want to know more about it. But secondly, the Vogsphere server imposes a size limit on every turn-in repository. And that limit is 100 megabytes. Now normally you don't even come close to approaching that, but on a repository, however, if you start putting a lot of stuff in it, going beyond 100 megabytes, it's going to be considered a resource abuse. And that's going to be severely punished. So I advise you not to do that. And you may have noticed that when I git cloned, I'm going to do it again just in case you didn't see. There we go. There's a message saying this transaction has been started at some time. This is the time the server considers to determine if you still have the right or not to write on your repository. Yep, every time the project is turned in, there's a time limit. And at the very moment of that turn-in time, at the very precise second, you're not going to be able to push anything anymore to your repository. The state time allows you to connect to the server to push 30 seconds or 10 seconds before the time limit expires. It's going to tell you, okay, this started at 11:41 p.m. in 50 seconds. So, even if the interaction takes really long, for example, if your 1,000 fellow students are pushing at the same time, it's a crazy idea, but you never know what could happen. The time set to check is to see if you have access in the time beginning. So even if you push takes 5 minutes and ends at 11:46 p.m., even if the time limit is 11:42 p.m., it doesn't matter. You started before 11:42 p.m. The only thing that matters is that you allowed the command to finish. Don't interrupt. Don't push Control-C to cancel a clone while cloning it either, because if you restart cloning, maybe the time limit will now have expired and nothing will save you. Also, you may have noticed that there are a lot of people working on the Git simultaneously. It happens rarely, but Git will tell you you're queuing in a waiting line once your transaction has started. Same thing, don't panic and don't interrupt the connection. Git only tells you, I'm too busy at the moment. Git will update regularly to tell you there are still X amount of people before you, please stand by. Once again, don't worry, it's normal. So, last few things. The authentication on the server is done with a Kerberos ticket. That's something you automatically get whenever you log into your computer, but a Kerberos ticket, as you'll realize it sooner or later, expires after a certain amount of time. Sometimes you have to renew it. So you want to make sure that you have it. I'll show you an example of how to do this. You can do the klist command, which will list every ticket you own. For example, here it says I have a Kerberos ticket that expires on June 27th at 3 a.m. This helps. I'm going to artificially destroy it though to show you what happens when you don't have a ticket. After kdestroy, you'll see I won't have any tickets anymore. So now if I try git clone, it will tell me PD, which means permission denied. In that case, what should I do? I use the kinit command with my login and my password to get a new ticket. Klist again, and now you see I have a ticket, and then I'll be able to git clone, and it will work wonderfully. So, if you encounter this problem, you know the solution is kinit. Last thing you haven't seen yet, but that's because I haven't done it before, you won't have it when you'll use your computer for the first time, so you'll have to do it yourself. When you want to do a commit, it will tell you, I don't know your name nor your email, so I've generated one for you automatically. It'll print a 32-mile error message to tell you to configure your Git, etc. In fact, it's really easy. It's only about 2 commands to launch, plus it gives them to you. So when you'll see it, don't worry, you didn't break anything, just do as it says. Write your first and second name and your email, and that'll make it happy. There, we talked about almost everything you have to know about the Vogsphere. I really invite you to once again read the documentation, which is on git-scm.com, because in the end, Git's a really, really evolved system, which has way more possibilities than this pitiful example I just showed you today. And this was just the essential to manage delivering something. However, you can do so many more awesome things with Git if you only know how to use it. It would be a real shame not to inform yourself about it and not use every single possibility this wonderful software offers. But I'm going to stop right here with the Git propaganda and wish you a lovely day and see you next time.